A while ago, I talked about whether fighting games as a genre could do with a bit more standardization, whether it's controls, universal mechanics, or terminology. I made the argument that although the genre could stand to be more accessible by doing that, what makes fighting games so interesting is how different they are from each other. But if there's one area where there's little to no reason for devs not to outright steal each other's good ideas, it has to be user experience and quality of life. By nature, those are little things that often barely get a mention, but they add up to a much nicer experience playing the game. So I thought it'd be nice to shout out those unsung heroes of UX so that developers know how to make their game extra special if they run out of work for their next patch or next game. Quick disclaimer, whichever game I'm using to demonstrate a feature is just an example. It isn't necessarily the one that did it first, nor the only one that does it. I'm also focusing only on ideas that already exist in other fighting games, and that are primarily about stuff outside of an actual match. But please let us know in the comments of any new ideas you have. Without further ado, let's dive into solo play QOL. Compared to most other games, fighting games tend to be fairly heavy on game modes, with arcade, versus, training, story, online modes, just to name a few. And when you've got that many, you're going to have to wade through a bunch of menus to pick the one you want. But after a certain amount of playtime, a player will only really engage with a couple of modes at best. And even then, you'll probably still have a few more menus to get through before you actually get into a game, or at least in a queue for one. Other genres of multiplayer games have understood that getting you into a match in as few button presses as possible is good user experience. Given its heritage, it's not surprising that 2XKO gets it, but a few other fighting games caught on to this to an extent, and will let you build an easy-to-access custom menu with the options of your choice, such as Granblue or Tekken 8. Some will even go further and let you jump into a specific mode with the press of a single shortcut from the main menu. SF6, for instance, lets you jump straight into training mode, restoring whichever settings you used last, while Guilty Gear Xrd lets you assign shortcuts to 2 menu items of your choice. Once you've picked a game mode, you're probably going to have to...
Please tell me your select!
Most games will default to whichever character you last used, which should probably be the standard at this point, but some games take a different approach. Tekken 8 lets you set a preferred character and costume so you can bypass the character select entirely for certain modes. But since that's buried in the options, I prefer the way it was done in Tekken 7, where you could quickly set and recall a favorite directly from the character select screen. The way the characters are presented on that screen can also affect user experience, or at least a beginner's experience. Strive and Granblue try to give some sort of description of the character's playstyle and or their ease of use. DNF Duel will even give you some key bullet points, although they only show up in the character select for training mode. Some games, such as Fantasy Strike, will choose not to sugarcoat it and straight up group characters by archetype. Of course, this will all be redundant once you've picked a main, but if your buddy just convinced you to try their game of choice, this kind of thing means they don't have to hold your hand through your first hour of gameplay. When playing online, matches will usually be played on a random stage, but for many games, the stage is purely cosmetic and does not affect the gameplay at all. When this is the case, you don't actually need to sync the stage between the players. SF6 doesn't, for instance, where your opponent will very likely play on a different stage from you, which enables a neat QOL by proxy. Because different stages have more or less shit going on in the background, some stages are more taxing on your system than others, which can lead to frame rate drops if you play on a potato. SF6 lets you exclude certain stages from the random select, which is nice because a lot of people would rather never see the grid outside of training mode, if ever, but there are people who are only able to play the game on the emptiest of stages. Not syncing stages between online opponents allow everyone to have their cake and eat it too. Obviously, this doesn't work for games where stage hazards and ring outs are a thing, but where it makes sense, this small design decision can improve the experience of many people. Oh, by the way, talking about potatoes, having a benchmark to see how well the game is running on your PC, like in Injustice 2, is great. And locking people out of online play if the system fails to pass the benchmark, like Killer Instinct does, will probably save a lot of people from a terrible experience. Online matchmaking is going to be by far the most common game mode people interact with, whether it's ranked or casual play. Usually, you have to choose one or the other, which can be a bit of a gamble regarding matchmaking times in games with smaller player bases. Sometimes you just want to play and you don't care if it's a ranked or casual match. Surprisingly, the game that solves that problem is the one who probably needs to worry about it the least. And Street Fighter, since at least number 5, would let you queue for both ranked and casual matches at the same time, which would definitely help less populated games where it's harder to find a match. But sometimes the player base is so small that even merging queues is not enough to get matches in a reasonable time frame. In that case, hopefully the devs have accepted that the game is going to be a niche one and have implemented something like Guilty Gear Plus R's quick match system, which, very similar to Fightcade, just lets you see who's online and challenge them directly, rather than having to wait for matchmaking to become increasingly less picky about potential matches. On the topic of waiting, it is good when games let you do other things while you wait for matchmaking to find you an opponent. Some games will let you wait in training mode if they don't force you in there outright, while some will let you wander the public lobbies while the queuing happens in the background. SF6 even lets you queue while watching replays, which I would probably do more often if that was an option in the games I play. Oh, by the way, if I can be in training mode while I'm queuing, please allow me to lab with a different character than the one I'm queuing with, like in Arc System Works games. Regardless of which queue you picked, most games already let you narrow or widen the search with additional filters, but there are a few extra options I'd like to see in more games. First one is the ability to set the rank range for the matchmaking search, as you can find it in Tekken to some extent, or with more granularity in French-bred games like Unit 2 and Type Lumina. If we frequent the same Discord servers, you've probably heard me bitch about being matched with opponents that really aren't in my skill bracket. The value of such encounters is a topic for another time, and I know that filtering those out can make it harder to find matches, but I think it's good to have a choice of how wide the net you want to cast when queuing, as long as you're aware of the trade-off. The other matchmaking option I'd like to see more of is one you can find in Dead or Alive 6 or Unit 2, a toggle that prevents the game from matching you with your last opponent. I don't know about you, but my objective when queuing online is to fight a variety of opponents. So getting the same opponent 4 sets in a row is not very interesting to me, even if it's an easy win. And finally, even though I think this is more or less standard at this point, I'll briefly mention the ability to see information about your opponent before accepting the match, namely ping and connection type. Because even though playing against Wi-Fi opponent is, on average, not as bad as people would have you believe, I can understand people not wanting to take chances. Making deliberate choices with these matchmaking options at the cost of longer queue times is something more games should allow, and I expect it would lead to fewer rage quits or one and dones. Speaking of which, if a set is cut short, whether it's from an intentional disconnect or a desync due to bad connection, please let me block the opponent on the spot, like Strive and I think SF6 do. It's always frustrating when the opponent who seem to be playing on airplane Wi-Fi doesn't show up on the list of recent opponents because they desynced in the first match. Somewhat related, many games now include bad connection detection and give the option to call for a no contest result, ending the match immediately and have it not count. But for the love of Wake Up Supers, please do it the same way as Tekken and make it a unilateral decision. If I think the connection is so dogshit it's unplayable, I don't need my opponent to agree. Another good feature you'll find in Tekken's end of match screen is the ability to check your opponent's profile, just in case you need to take certain actions. Street Fighter 6 and Unit 2 have options at the end of a match to invite your opponent to a private lobby and continue playing together. I probably wouldn't use this feature because, as I said, that's not what I'm looking for when queuing online, but I like that the option is there, and I've been told that it can be a lifeline in niche fighters because it's harder to get games in otherwise. On a different note, a set of features I particularly appreciate in fighting games, albeit for selfish reasons, are privacy features, sometimes called streamer mode. Being able to hide your gamer tags so you don't get stream sniped or flooded with friend requests is nice, but for me it's more about preserving the privacy of my opponent, because some people can get weird if they see their ass handed to them in a clip. So when the game lets me hide my opponent's tag like in SF6 or Tekken 8, it saves me having to blur them out in my edits. In the same ballpark, while player expression via character customization is great, there are some customs that are better off staying on their creator's screen only, as they could cause problems with streams, or sometimes some character colors cause gameplay issues. That's why it's nice when you have the options, such as in Granblue, where you can force your opponent's characters to use the default costume and colors when playing online. And Strive 2.0 recently made it so that when playing online, you always get your selected color even if you're P2 and your opponent picked the same, which Color 1 enjoyers such as myself will appreciate. Outside of ranked matchmaking, private lobbies or rooms are probably the most common way people play fighting games online. Yet, for something which is at this point a basic feature for the genre, the experience of creating or joining lobbies surprisingly ranges from effortless to unnecessarily annoying depending on the game. Generally, creating a lobby goes like this. You go to the corresponding menu item, you set your parameters such as the number of stations, the length of a set, who gets to stay on the station and for how long, and off you go. Now, people who want to join you either have to be invited or they have to find your lobby, which is kinda hard when your lobby browser has no search function. Being able to invite people directly is kinda the obvious choice, but that often requires having people in your friends list, and some people are picky about who is in their friend list. So adding as a Steam or PSN friend a random person you met on Discord just to invite them into a lobby ain't ideal. And unless there's an in-game friends list, it won't work cross-platform. Usually, when you set up a lobby, you don't want unexpected guests to join, so you'll often have the option to lock the lobby down in some way, like a numerical code that either the game generates for you, or which you can define yourself. My favorite implementation of room passwords is in Granblue and in Under Night, where the password can be any string of your choice, because words are easier to remember than passcodes, and the game lets you search rooms by password, meaning that's the only piece of information you need to give to people who want to join. It's even better when the game remembers the password you set for the next time you create or search for a lobby, like in Granblue. Street Fighter VI has, in my opinion, one of, if not the best implementations of private lobbies and social features. With finer-grained lobby permissions, you can, for instance, let your friends in automatically, and they can join you directly from the friends list or club list, and vice versa. And in the spirit of reducing clicks required to play the game, it now also lets you quickly create lobbies from the main menu with Drive Link. The other advantage when people don't need to wait for an invite is that they can join the lobby while the host is in the middle of a match. Speaking of being mid-match, please let people spectate matches in progress, like in Granblue, but with the option to watch the match from the beginning, like SF6 does, as that's particularly useful when streaming online brackets. In most games, spectating in lobbies is effectively watching a replay in slightly delayed real time, and I'm willing to bet that it's often using the exact same technology under the hood. So, where it makes sense, it's nice when features available in replays are also available when spectating, such as frame data display for instance, as you can find in Tekken 8 and Street Fighter 6. The downside of this method of spectating is that you have to actually load the stage and characters to spectate, meaning that while you get a really nice view of the action, you can't really do anything else while spectating. VF5 and 2XKO have opted for a video stream that plays while you remain in the lobby, so jumping in and out of spectating is pretty much seamless. On that note, let's talk about things to do in lobbies. If you've ever been in a private lobby, you might have noticed that you spend a lot of time not playing. Like, you're either spectating, waiting for your turn, waiting for your pal to join the lobby, or waiting for the other pair to finish their set so you can swap opponents. Granblue has an interesting solution to that last one, where you can set the room to shuffle mode, which automatically moves people around stations, so you don't end up with a 6-people lobby where you fight the same one person for 2 hours. But even that, you're probably still going to be waiting a little bit, so at the very least, please let people in the lobby know how far along an ongoing match is, like in Strive or DOA 6. I know this kind of replicates the arcade vibe, but why restrict ourselves to the limitations of the physical world when we don't have to? So it's nice when you can do other stuff while waiting. Granblue will let you spin up training mode while you wait for an opponent to show up, and so does Street Fighter 6. But the latter goes even further with the lobby multitasking by letting you spectate a station while you're queuing at another. Speaking of training mode, more and more games let you do online training mode, which is very useful when your Discord buddy needs to show you some tech, because while you could just go into a match and ignore the clock, it's much nicer to have all the amenities that training mode offers. SF6 and Granblue will let you assign one or more of the room's stations to training mode, which is much better than Strive's or KOF's all or nothing approach, which itself is better than Tekken's go to the specific spot in Fight Lounge to start online training. Following the theme of using lobbies to learn, Granblue lobbies have a spot where you can watch replays of lobby matches without needing to leave said lobby, which is great for VOD reviews. At least it would be greater if several people could watch the same replay together. To end on lobbies, the last few things worth mentioning are the ability to change lobby settings without needing to kick everyone out and recreate the room, with once again SF6 and Granblue leading by example, but unlike the latter, having host migration is also a massive QoL improvement, so that people who want to keep playing don't have to remake the room if the host needs to leave. I know it's not an easy thing to implement, but it's even harder if you don't plan for it from the beginning. I meant to make this video as low effort content to make my way back into the partner program, but there was so much to talk about I had to split it up into a 4-part series, which I'll release over the next few weeks. Do let us know in the comments if there's any cool features I've missed, and tune in next week for the next part focusing on QoL features that relates to learning from within the game.